G'day, it's Senator Malcolm Roberts with his weekly recap on events that have happened this week. And that's been in Canberra. Look, let me tell you, it's just, what words can I use? It's so frustrating and annoying being in Canberra. The job we have to do for the people of Australia is fantastic, but there's just so much rubbish that goes on in that Parliament House. You know, it's like running through molasses. It's almost impossible. Or running along a hot tar road with your feet continually sticking to the ground. It feels like we're getting nowhere, but bit by bit we're chipping away. Well, speaking of chipping away, the history of the carbon dioxide tax, or the carbon tax, it's now called a safeguard mechanism. A safeguard mechanism. Can you believe it? It'll destroy our country, but it's called a safeguard mechanism. They've called it an emissions trading scheme. People woke up to that and it was labelled correctly a carbon dioxide tax. They called it a carbon tax. It was started to get away with that, and then people correctly identified it as a carbon dioxide tax. Then what was the next one? Then now we've got the safeguard mechanism, which was introduced by Malcolm Turnbull as Prime Minister, Liberal Prime Minister, and Greg Hunt, the Liberal Environment spokesman and climate change spokesman, in 2015. That's when this was introduced. I'm starting to get angry because I can see what this is doing to this country, will do to this country. It was introduced in 2015. Like so many other things that the Liberal Nationals have introduced on climate and energy, the Labor Party is now ramping it up, putting it on steroids. And so now we've got a carbon dioxide tax because the safeguard mechanism passed the Parliament on Thursday morning. Thursday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, to be correct. So we've now got a carbon dioxide tax, which will mean that what will happen is they pick 215 of the largest producers of carbon dioxide, which is a trace atmospheric gas essential to all life on the planet. It's been demonized by the UN, as I'll explain in a minute. But that's what they're using in order to justify a tax on your use of hydrocarbon fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. For the last 170 years of the Industrial Revolution, the thing that has stood out the most to give us our phones, our microphones, our computers, our TVs, the building I'm sitting in, our transport, all the things, longer life, safer life, healthier life, more comfortable life, easier life, more productive life, wealthier life, all of these things have been due to a relentless decrease in the cost of energy in real terms after inflation. The real price of energy has been plummeting. What they've been doing since John Howard started doing it in 1996 is reversing that trend for human progress and increasing the cost of electricity. And that is destroying our standard of living. So what they want to do is what they will do now is take the 215 largest producers of carbon dioxide, give them a cap, they can't produce any more carbon dioxide, and then they have to cut it 5% every year. So it's essentially a tax on production of carbon dioxide. Companies will either go broke or most of them will just pass it on to the customer. Every year, a 5% cut in their output of carbon dioxide. 5% cut in their outputs, in their production of goods and services. Or they can buy credits. When they have to buy something that doesn't produce anything, it adds to the price of your goods because the customers pay for it. And we all know that when something is taxed, we get less of it, much less of it. And what's left is much more expensive. And that's exactly what's happening, what it will happen with this safeguard mechanism. Notice the word, safeguard mechanism. It's just like so much of what the World Economic Forum and the UN push. Lovely title around it. I mean, how can you argue with sustainability and biodiversity and biosecurity and all the rest of it? But they're just nice, fluffy words. They hide something far more sinister. So I spoke in my speech against that carbon dioxide tax. I said that the details are not defined. The details are not defined. Who will define them? Well, it'll be the bureaucrats and the minister responsible. So we've given them an open-ended check, just an open-ended check to destroy our country. You're fooling with energy which is primacy of energy. Well, it is is primary because it goes right throughout the whole economy. It affects everything, and energy, when it affects the processes of say, for example, the start of the transports to put raw materials into a factory, the factory itself assembling the raw materials, the distribution afterwards. The cost of energy is in everything. So when you add it through all stages of a production facility and transport and distribution facility, you're increasing the cost many, many times. That's the first thing. Families will be doing it tougher. Workers will be doing it tougher because workers will be thrown out of work. Then we ask the question, what about China? What about India? What about Russia? These countries are producing huge amounts of carbon dioxide, and that's not of concern to me because it's not harming anything. It's not changing the climate. I'll get to that in a minute. But what it does mean is that they are not paying the extra tax that Australia is taxing our companies with. China, India, Russia will continue to take our jobs, take our manufacturing. So families and workers will pay by losing jobs and by higher costs of living. The country will pay by loss of security, loss of our manufacturing, losses of our agriculture. The science has never been produced on this. I've repeatedly asked for the empirical scientific data within a logical scientific framework that proves cause and effect. The minister, yet again, Minister McAllister, dishonestly avoided the question repeatedly. When she said the United Nations has the science, I said, give me the page number, give me the specific location. She couldn't do it. She just came back and said, nothing will satisfy you, Senator Roberts, which is her way of saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm just digging my heels in, and nothing would ever satisfy me. I don't know what science is. Well, we've talked about her in the past. We're talking about her again in the future. So the science is not there. I've explained that to McAllister, and she cannot come back with anything concrete at all in the science. This is a policy that has no basis. They have never quantified the impact of carbon dioxide from human activity on any aspect of climate. There's no basis for the policy. How can you assess alternatives? How can you measure progress towards tracking whether or not the policy is safe, sound and effective? You can't. It's an open-ended checkbook. And then the whole thing was based, and I outlined this in my speech, the whole thing is based on two crooks, Al Gore and Maurice Strong. And I won't go into the details here, but they concocted this. Maurice Strong concocted it, even though he is a crook in terms of the UN Food for Oil scandal and crimes in Western United States that he was sought for by the American law enforcement officials. And he exiled himself in China. Now, Maurice Strong and Al Gore formed the Chicago Climate Exchange, wanting to trade carbon dioxide credits. Now do you see what's happening? They will make billions out of it. Maurice Strong has since died at the age of 80 plus. But he was the mastermind behind this whole thing. And now our government, our Labor, Greens and Teals, Pocock, are in cahoots with them so that they can get an international carbon dioxide trading scheme going. Asked the minister what needs does it satisfy. She couldn't come up with any, other than the prevention of climate catastrophe. So these people are pushing a crooked policy that is aimed at helping crooks. And this safeguard mechanism is now enabled to be trading internationally. And when Greg Hunt and Malcolm Turnbull shoved this through the Parliament in 2015, it was pointed out that would enable, it was the basis for global carbon dioxide tax and global carbon dioxide trading. It's trading in vapor, nothing quantified. I want to compliment Senator Matt Canavan, though. I've been a strong critic of his because he said in a speech back in 2015 that the Liberals show me that we need to cut our carbon dioxide production. And he couldn't ever, I've tackled him about it, I've spoken about it many times, and he couldn't justify it. Well, with that pressure, at least Matt has responded in the right way. He's now come back to being a climate skeptic because he knows there's no evidence. He was a climate skeptic. He was moved the other way. Now he's come back to being climate skeptic. And he spoke very well on the economics. Next thing, the Liberal national parties have been asking for the government to produce the modelling behind the safeguard mechanism. And they've refused. Then the Greens adopted that motion, and just before, and they put it on the notice paper for Thursday or Wednesday, I can't remember. And just before they were due to do it, introduce the motion, they did a deal, it seems, with the Labor Party and yanked that motion. So the Greens are using the Senate to try and get their way. They're using it to manipulate. And what we see, and they're working very closely with the Labor Party, Labor, Greens, and Teal Senator Pocock are in a coalition that has a majority by one in the Senate. So that's the way they operate, because they're looking after each other. We had some success, although the motion wasn't successful. There was a big change that happened. I wanted to refer the United Nations World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty to a Senate inquiry. That would be under the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Committee. So we had, the significant thing was that the Liberal Nationals joined me in supporting that motion for referral to an inquiry to explore the UN World Health Organization's pandemic treaty. I had Senator Babette. I had Senator Hanson, of course. We also had Tammy Tyrrell and Jackie Lambie. So I want to thank all of them for their support on that. But the motion did not get up, even though it's a huge threat to national sovereignty, this UN World Health Organization pandemic treaty. It did not get up because the Greens voted against it. The Labor Party voted against it. David Pocock, the Teal senator, voted against it. Lydia Thorpe, the Black Sovereignty senator, whatever her party is, she voted against it. So these people have no concern, no consideration, no allegiance to national sovereignty of our country. I have to go to another appointment soon, but before I do, I just want to talk about, next week we'll have to talk about the banks, because I did another question. I want to summarize those two questions that I did in the Senate in question time, but I haven't got time for that now. I want to get on to the voice, because it started rearing its head this past 2 weeks. I recorded a fantastic episode of the Malcolm Roberts Show earlier today with Anthony Dillon, and that'll be released on Tuesday coming, next Tuesday, in a few days' time. Anthony stunned me. I knew he was good, but he is very, very good. Just the whole way, just everything he talked about, the ease with which he talks about things. We didn't spend much time on the voice in the recording today, but we talked about things that I think people will find fascinating. He's a really intelligent, very calm, sensible guy. Very impressive, very impressive. And the things he said will really satisfy most people who are listening, I think. But let's get on to the points with the voice before I go. Number one, it's racist. It is based on separating two races and giving one race special treatment. There are no details at all. And they are, what's more, they are deliberately hiding the details. It's a very simple fact that they can provide the evidence that shows what the Solicitor General advised the government on, but they won't do it. Why? Because we know that the Solicitor General has raised some serious concerns about it. The voice will interfere in all stages of making laws. Parliament will be beholden to the voice. The change of wording to our Constitution, which is our supreme governing body, governing entity, that's who the King and Queen work for and serve the Constitution. Only the people can change the Constitution. And our Constitution is the only Constitution anywhere in the world that the people voted on. So it's a people's Constitution. Every change in the past has been ratified, has been voted on by the people. Many have been rejected. And every change in the past has had the wording of the changes to the Constitution on the ballot paper. Not this one. Not this one. Just a very vague wording alluding to the fact that there will be a voice. Not the details. They want to put in a chapter, a whole new chapter, There are only 8 chapters now. They want to add a 9th chapter. Some of the clauses within the new chapters sections are contradicting other clauses. What they're trying to do is make a change without giving people the wording. If you see the wording, you'll be horrified. And we'll be talking more about this. What they're fundamentally doing is taking a people's constitution, arguably the only people's constitution anywhere on the planet, a people's constitution that has worked very well, people's constitution that has worked very well despite Parliament, sometimes some of the parties in Parliament, deviating from it. It's a fantastic constitution. They're changing the people's constitution, and they want to make it a politician's constitution because the words will be left to the politicians. I don't want a politician's constitution. I want a people's constitution. What's needed is to ensure that Aboriginal Australians can access the same opportunities that are given to all people within this nation, instead of being treated racist and treating people differently based on race. We must keep Australia as one nation. I'll see you next Thursday because Friday's Easter, so we'll do this live stream next Thursday. And until then, I hope you stay safe and free. Thank you.